Welcome to Revenge with Roman, where secrets, betrayal, and heartbreak ignite stories that test the limits of trust and love. In today's tale, emotions run deep and the truth cuts sharper than any blade. When a loving husband uncovers the dark past his wife tried to bury, his world crumbles. And what follows is a journey of pain, revelation, and cold-blooded revenge. Ethan Cole always believed he knew every detail about his wife, Rachel. From her favorite childhood book to the way she liked her coffee in the morning, everything felt familiar and safe. They had been married for 5 years, building a quiet, comfortable life together in a modest suburban home filled with laughter, love, and shared memories. Ethan had always trusted Rachel without question. She was calm, collected, and affectionate, someone who made him believe that he had finally found stability after years of heartbreak. But one ordinary evening would begin to change everything he thought he knew. It started on a rainy Thursday night. Ethan had come home early from work, planning to surprise Rachel with dinner. He noticed the living room lights were dim, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. As he moved toward the bedroom, he noticed Rachel's laptop open on the bed. She rarely left it unlocked. Curiosity wasn't in his nature, but something about that unlocked screen pulled him closer. At first he thought it would just be work emails or online shopping tabs. But then a folder titled Memories caught his attention. Inside were dozens of old photos, many of them harmless. Family gatherings, college friends, vacations. Yet near the bottom he saw a series of pictures that made his chest tighten. There she was, Rachel, smiling in ways Ethan had never seen before, standing close to a man he didn't recognize. The man's arm was wrapped around her, their faces pressed together in a way that spoke of intimacy and deep affection. The dates on the photos were from just a year before she met Ethan. His heart began to race. He tried to brush it off. Everyone had a past, right? But the deeper he scrolled, the more uneasy he became. There were messages, too. Archived emails from someone named L. The words were raw, passionate, and filled with a sense of history that made Ethan's stomach twist. He told himself to stop reading, but he couldn't. The emails revealed a love that hadn't ended cleanly. Phrases like, "I still dream about you," and "You promised we'd find our way back," echoed in his mind. Each sentence chipped away at the trust he had built with Rachel. What hurt the most wasn't that she had loved someone before him. It was that she had hidden it so completely, almost as if she had buried that part of her life to create a new identity. He wondered why. Was it shame, guilt, or something far worse? The sound of the front door unlocking jolted him out of his thoughts. He quickly minimized the window, his hands trembling as Rachel walked in, shaking off her umbrella. "You're home early," she said, smiling, unaware of the storm brewing inside him. Ethan forced a smile, his mind spinning with the images and words he had just seen. As she talked about her day, he studied her face closely, trying to find any trace of the woman in those photographs. That night, while she slept peacefully beside him, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling. Every laugh, every kiss, every affectionate word they'd shared suddenly felt like a lie. His mind replayed those pictures over and over, his heart refusing to accept what his eyes had seen. He remembered how Rachel had always avoided talking about her past relationships, brushing them off as nothing worth mentioning. He had never pushed her, until now he thought it didn't matter. But something about the look in that man's eyes in the photo told Ethan it did. The next day, Ethan couldn't focus at work. The images followed him everywhere, whispering doubts he couldn't silence. During lunch, he found himself searching for clues, looking up old college photos of Rachel on social media, scrolling through tagged posts, hoping to find the man from the pictures. When he finally did, his stomach dropped. The man named Liam Hart wasn't just some ex. He was someone still living in the same city, someone who occasionally liked Rachel's old posts. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell Ethan that whatever they had wasn't completely erased. Ethan's curiosity turned into quiet obsession. That evening, when Rachel went out for groceries, he searched again, this time through her drawers, her old journals, anything that might explain what he had found. In the bottom of a box filled with mementos, he discovered a small envelope sealed with a dried-out flower pressed against it. Inside were handwritten letters. The first one began with, "My forever, Liam." Ethan's hands trembled as he read lines that painted a picture of a relationship far deeper than he ever imagined. They had talked about running away together, about starting a new life. But the final letter ended abruptly with words that hinted at betrayal and heartbreak. "I can't forgive you for what you did." Ethan sat on the floor for hours, staring at the pieces of her secret past scattered around him. It felt like he was reading about a stranger, not the woman he shared his life with. He couldn't understand why she would hide this, why she never mentioned Liam at all. Every reason she could have given felt like an excuse. When Rachel came home, Ethan acted as though nothing had happened, but something inside him had already cracked. He knew that this discovery wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something darker, something that would change everything between them. The truth was no longer buried. It was waiting to tear their world apart. The following morning, Ethan tried to shake off the uneasiness that had taken root in his chest, but it lingered like a shadow he couldn't escape. He watched Rachel move around the kitchen, humming softly as she made coffee, completely unaware of the storm inside him. Her smile looked effortless, but to Ethan it felt rehearsed. Every glance, every small touch from her hand, seemed tainted by the images burned into his mind. The pictures, the letters, the name Liam. He wanted to ask her about it, to confront her, but something inside him told him to wait. He needed to be sure, needed to see just how deep the lies ran. That day felt like any other until a phone call changed everything. Ethan was sitting at his desk when his phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled him to answer. "Hello?" he said cautiously. There was a brief silence before a man's voice spoke on the other end. "Is this Ethan Cole?" The tone was calm, confident, but carried an unsettling edge. "Yes, who's this?" Ethan asked. The man chuckled softly, almost mockingly. "You don't know me, but I know your wife. Tell Rachel I said hi. She'll remember." The line went dead before Ethan could respond. For a moment he sat frozen, staring at his phone in disbelief. His pulse quickened and a sickening feeling twisted in his stomach. He replayed the voice in his head, trying to connect it to someone he might know. But the familiarity wasn't his. It was hers. Could it be Liam? He rushed home that evening, pretending everything was normal, but his mind was racing. When Rachel walked through the door, he watched her closely. She looked tired but calm, her expression unreadable. "Someone called for you today," Ethan said casually, setting a trap to gauge her reaction. She froze mid-step. "For me? Who?" she asked, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "He didn't say his name," Ethan replied, watching her carefully. "Just told me to tell you he said hi." Her face paled, the color draining from her cheeks. It was subtle, but Ethan noticed. She quickly turned away, pretending to busy herself with the mail. "Probably a wrong number," she muttered, her voice shaky. But Ethan knew better. That small reaction confirmed his worst suspicion. She was hiding something deeper than he had imagined. That night when Rachel said she was going to bed early, Ethan stayed up, his mind spinning in circles. Who was that man? What did he mean by "she'll remember"? The question kept echoing in his head like a ticking clock. He opened his laptop and searched through her phone records, something he never thought he'd do. Sure enough, there it was, an incoming call from an unknown number earlier that afternoon, followed by several outgoing calls to a contact saved only as office. But Ethan knew her office number. This wasn't it. The next day, Rachel acted as if nothing had happened, but her sudden nervous energy betrayed her. She avoided eye contact, laughed too loudly at small things, and kept her phone glued to her hand. Ethan played along, pretending to be the oblivious, loving husband, but every moment only fueled his quiet rage. He began noticing things he'd overlooked before. Late-night messages, her stepping outside to take calls, her silencing notifications whenever he entered the room. He started connecting dots that led to one undeniable truth. Rachel's past wasn't as buried as she wanted him to believe. A week later, the tension reached its peak. Ethan returned home early again, parking a few houses away so she wouldn't hear the car. As he approached their front door, he heard her voice, soft, emotional, and filled with something he hadn't heard in years. Longing. He couldn't make out every word, but one sentence hit him like a knife to the chest. "You shouldn't have called me." Ethan can't find out. His breath caught in his throat. She was talking to him, the same man from the photos, the same voice from the mysterious call. He stepped back, every instinct telling him to burst inside and confront her, but he didn't. Instead, he quietly turned away, his heart pounding, his mind already forming a plan. He knew now that Rachel's secret past wasn't just a chapter she'd closed. It was something still alive, something dangerous, something that had the power to destroy everything he thought was real. That phone call wasn't random. It was a warning, and it shattered the fragile illusion of their perfect marriage forever. Ethan could no longer live with the uncertainty gnawing at him. The phone call had confirmed that Rachel's past was still haunting their marriage, and now he needed the truth, every piece of it. For days he played the part of a loving husband, masking his anger beneath calm smiles and quiet nods. Rachel, unaware that he had already begun to see through her act, continued to lie effortlessly, weaving small excuses to cover her unease. But Ethan had changed. He wasn't the trusting man he once was. Something inside him had hardened. Every conversation, every text, every faint smile from her felt like a clue to a puzzle he was determined to solve. He began his quiet investigation with her phone. One night after Rachel fell asleep, he waited until her breathing grew steady before slipping the device from her nightstand. He had memorized her passcode, her birthday, something so ordinary it almost insulted him. Once inside, he found what he had expected. A string of deleted messages, all recovered easily from a backup app she had overlooked. The texts were short but unmistakable in tone, intimate, cautious, familiar. "I can't keep doing this," one said. He's starting to notice. Another read, "I told you, we have to stop before it's too late." Each word sank deeper into Ethan's mind, carving lines of betrayal that he would never forget. He took screenshots, forwarded them to his own email, and carefully erased his tracks. His hands shook, not from guilt but from rage. He sat in the dark, staring at the glowing screen, his reflection faintly visible behind her words. He could almost hear Rachel's voice whispering them, her tone soft and guilty. Who was she when he wasn't around? How long had this been going on? Over the next week, Ethan began noticing more signs. Rachel started leaving the house earlier than usual, dressed slightly better, her makeup done even on ordinary mornings. She claimed she was attending a new client meeting, but Ethan knew she hadn't mentioned any new projects at work. The smallest inconsistencies in her story began to stand out like red flags. He followed her one morning, keeping his car at a careful distance. She drove across town, not toward her office, but to a quiet coffee shop tucked between two old buildings. From his car, he saw her park and step out, her face anxious but excited. Then he saw him, the man from the photos, Liam. Time seemed to slow as Liam approached her, pulling her into a brief, hesitant embrace. Ethan's vision blurred for a moment, his pulse hammering in his ears. The world around him faded into a low hum as he watched them talk. Their faces close, their movements familiar. She was supposed to be at work, yet here she was, revisiting the same ghost from her past. Ethan gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every instinct screamed to confront her right there, to demand the truth in front of the man who had haunted their marriage without even being present. But something colder inside him whispered, not yet. Confrontation would only give them control of the story. He wanted the truth to destroy her, not just hurt her. He took photos, dozens of them, carefully from different angles, ensuring every frame captured her deceit. When Rachel returned home that evening, Ethan greeted her with a kiss, his voice steady, his expression unreadable. "How was work?" he asked casually. She smiled and said, "Busy as always," before disappearing into the shower. That small lie, so casual and well-practiced, sealed something inside Ethan. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. That night, while she slept peacefully, Ethan opened his laptop again. He began digging into Liam's life, his job, his social media, his connections. It didn't take long to find out that Liam had never really moved on either. His posts were private, but one recent photo stood out, a blurred image of a woman's hand holding a coffee cup across the table. The same cup from that same cafe. The caption read, "Some things never fade." Ethan stared at the words until they burned into his memory. The more he uncovered, the more the story began to make sense. Rachel had never truly ended things with Liam. She had only buried them beneath layers of denial and guilt. But when Liam resurfaced, her carefully built world began to crack. Ethan realized she had been living a double life, torn between the man she once loved and the husband who had given her everything. What infuriated him most was that she thought he wouldn't notice, that she could continue this quiet deception forever. The investigation became his obsession. He checked her emails, her schedule, even the tracking history of her car. Each discovery was another thread pulled from the fabric of their marriage. He wasn't looking for proof anymore, he already had it. What he wanted now was understanding. Why him? Why now? Was it unfinished business, or had she simply grown bored of their ordinary life? The questions haunted him more than the betrayal itself. Ethan started keeping a journal of every detail he uncovered. Times, dates, photos, messages, carefully organized like evidence in a case. The more he wrote, the clearer his plan became. He wasn't going to confront her yet. He wasn't going to shout or cry. Instead, he would wait for the perfect moment to let her lies destroy her from the inside out. Every secret she had hidden would soon see the light, and when that happened, there would be no turning back. Ethan wasn't just a husband anymore. He had become her silent judge, her shadow, and soon, her reckoning. The day Liam reappeared in their lives felt like the first crack in a dam Ethan hadn't known was there. Small at first, almost insignificant until it widened into a rending chasm. He saw him by accident, a reflection in the window of the cafe where Rachel met a client, a familiar profile that snagged at a memory like a splinter. Liam moved through the street with a casual ease, as if the city still belonged to him, as if the years between then and now had never existed. Ethan watched from across the glass and felt something cold and uncontrollable stir inside him. The man who had haunted Rachel's past was no longer a photograph or a message deleted in haste. He was real, living and breathing in the same air they shared. Rachel's behavior shifted the moment Ethan knew. Where there had once been an easy rhythm to her day, there were now pauses, breaths held, eyes that darted to the door, an absent look that lingered after she smiled. On the surface, she maintained composure, prepared excuses and gentle reassurances that fell flat against Ethan's growing suspicion. But in private, when the house was quiet and the lights low, she read messages with a tenderness that looked more like mourning than longing. Ethan learned to watch for the smallest betrayals, the way she smoothed her hair when her phone vibrated, the sudden defensiveness about places she said she'd been, the way she sometimes hummed a tune he didn't recognize before stopping, as if ashamed she had let it into their home. Liam's return wasn't a single event, but a slow, invasive tide. At first, there were coincidental sightings, Rachel bumping into him at a grocery store, an old classmate mentioning him at a reunion, a comment on a long-buried photograph that hinted at a reunion. Then came the messages Ethan couldn't ignore. A careful, coded conversation that appeared in her social media bookmarks, a voicemail clipped and saved under a name she swore was only a colleague. The voice on those recordings carried the soft familiarity of someone who had once been allowed inside. It referenced private jokes, places they'd been together, a nickname Rachel had never used in front of Ethan. Each sound was a fresh wound. He tried to keep a measured distance, but rage is a slow-working poison that changes a man. Ethan found his days rearranged around surveillance. Benign at first, he told himself, the careful records of a man who needed proof. He learned where Liam worked and how he moved through the city. He saw that Liam's life had not been the ruin hinted at in Rachel's letters. Parts of it were stable, others tentative. But there was a thread of regret running through his posts and comments, a sense that something had been paused and was now being considered again. The more Ethan observed, the more it seemed Liam's return had a purpose beyond chance. He wasn't merely a ghost wandering back into Rachel's orbit. He was trying to pull her back into the life they had once planned together. When Ethan finally confronted Rachel, carefully, like a prospector tapping at the edge of a cave, her denials were practiced and weary. He reached out, she said, voice small and brittle like someone trying not to shatter. I didn't ask him to. I told him we couldn't. I'm married, Ethan, I love you. He wanted to believe her. Part of him did. But trust once eroded leaves only questioning in its wake. He watched the way her shoulders curled inward as if bracing for judgment, and he saw that she was hiding not just contact, but emotion. There were lines on her face he had never seen before, shadows that belonged to private grief, to the memory of what she once chose. Rumors, subtle and cruel, began to drift through their neighborhood. Friends who had known them since before the marriage made awkward excuses, passing comments that hinted at meetings and looks exchanged on city streets. People offered help in the form of gossip disguised as concern. Ethan found himself answering questions with a measured smile while a storm gathered in his chest. It wasn't the whispers that hurt the most. It was the way Rachel withdrew into herself when anyone else was around, as if protecting a secret that made her ashamed. Shame is a corrosive thing. It can turn confession into silence and silence into deception. Liam, for his part, seemed unchanged by time. When Ethan finally saw him speak to Rachel in public, it was with a gentleness that enraged and fascinated him in equal measure. There was a polite warmth between them, the kind that comes from shared history and the knowledge of things said only once and never forgotten. He watched them stand close enough to touch, the kind of closeness Ethan had never seen reflected in their marriage. Rachel's laughter at something Liam said was like a blade, sharp, bright, and sudden. It cut him deeper than any shouting could have. As the old affair reignited, Ethan felt panic and calculation rise in tandem. He knew the power of memory, the way it can make a person feel younger, freer, willing to risk everything to reclaim a feeling that once mattered. He also knew his own anger was not a mirror of love, but a complex fusion of humiliation and fear. He began to map possible outcomes. Confrontation, confession, separation. None offered the satisfaction his bruised pride craved. Instead, he began to think in terms of leverage, evidence that would turn public curiosity into undeniable proof, moments that could be arranged to expose the depth of Rachel's divided loyalties. Yet beneath the planning, there was still a quieter, more dangerous impulse, the desire to understand. Why had Rachel kept this alive? Was it nostalgia, coercion, fear, or something darker? Blackmail, an old debt, a promise that had never been fully kept? Answers felt essential, not just for revenge, but for the possibility of saving whatever remnants of their life remained. He started to listen more than observe, to trace the thin threads that connected Rachel's present to her past, hoping to find the one that would explain everything. And in those late hours when the city was a low hum and Rachel slept fitfully beside him, Ethan realized that Liam's return had not only reignited Rachel's past, it had set them both on a path where the next choice would determine who they became, and whether the life they had built could survive a truth that was now burning with a heat neither of them could control. The next move belonged to Rachel, but Ethan began to suspect that she might not be the only one with a plan. Liam's presence suggested long, unresolved intentions, and as the pieces shifted, it became frighteningly clear that whatever had once been buried was waking up, and it wanted more than a memory, it wanted a life back with him. And when that choice came, the consequences would not only topple their marriage, but unravel secrets that had been kept for years, secrets that could change everything about how Ethan saw the woman he had married and the man who had once promised her forever but had left her with unfinished debts and a promise that now felt more like a threat than an apology. As the night stretched on and the city slept and Ethan sat awake thinking of how to respond while Rachel dreamed of a past that was suddenly impossibly present, and Ethan's transformation from a betrayed husband to a man plotting revenge didn't happen overnight. It crept in quietly, like a slow-burning fuse. At first he told himself he was only watching, collecting proof, trying to understand why Rachel had done what she did. But as the days passed, the pain began to harden into something darker. Every lie she told was a spark, every secret glance at her phone a flame, until the only thing left inside him was the desire to make her feel the same agony she had inflicted on him. He stopped confronting her directly. Instead, he became deliberate, strategic. Rachel thought his silence meant forgiveness, that he was trying to move past the tension that had consumed them for weeks. She didn't know that he was quietly building something behind that silence, a plan that would strip her carefully constructed life apart piece by piece. Ethan wanted her to see her lies unravel publicly, to feel cornered by the truth the same way she had cornered him with deceit. He would not shout or break things or beg for answers. His revenge would be slow, intelligent, and unforgettable. He began by gathering every trace of evidence he had, the photos, the messages, the recordings, even the letters she'd written to Liam years ago. He organized them meticulously in digital folders labeled with cold precision, but instead of hoarding them, he started planting pieces of that truth where Rachel couldn't control them. An anonymous email sent to Liam's workplace, a shared folder containing screenshots of their private conversations sent from a fake address, a subtle message to one of Rachel's closest friends, a friend who had always loved drama more than loyalty. Each move was small, calculated, and perfectly timed. Meanwhile, Ethan played his role to perfection. He was attentive, gentle even, asking Rachel about her day, cooking her favorite meals, pretending to rebuild their bond. She began to relax again, thinking maybe the worst had passed. But every time she smiled at him, he saw the ghost of her betrayal behind her eyes. That smile, once comforting, now made his blood boil. Still, he waited. Revenge, he knew, was only satisfying when it came at the exact right moment, when the person never saw it coming. Then came the moment he had been waiting for. Rachel had been invited to a charity gala through her firm, a high-profile event where her company's executives, clients, and colleagues would attend. Ethan offered to accompany her, playing the part of the supportive husband. He helped her pick her dress, complimented her endlessly, watched her beam with confidence. She thought their marriage was healing. In reality, Ethan had spent the past week ensuring that one particular flash drive found its way to the event's AV team. On that drive was a short video montage, one that would accidentally replace the slideshow she had prepared for the evening. As they arrived at the gala, Ethan could almost taste the tension in his chest. He smiled and shook hands, played polite, and waited as Rachel's name was called to the stage. The lights dimmed. The crowd turned toward the screen, and instead of company achievements or team photos, images began to play. Photos of Rachel and Liam together, messages flashing briefly before the audience could even process them fully. Her laughter, her confessions, her promises to Liam, all there in fragments, enough to paint the picture of a woman who had lived two lives. The room fell silent. Ethan watched Rachel's expression freeze, her confident smile melting into confusion, then horror. She stumbled off the stage, trembling, eyes wide as whispers rippled through the crowd. Every person she had tried to impress now looked at her with pity, shock, and quiet judgment. Liam's name was whispered in disbelief. Even her boss, a man who once admired her professionalism, turned away in disgust. Ethan didn't move. He simply sat at the edge of the crowd, his face expressionless, his heart pounding so loud he could feel it in his throat. Watching her humiliation unfold didn't bring him joy, no, not exactly. It was something colder, deeper, a satisfaction that settled like calm after a storm. Rachel looked around the room, searching for him, but he didn't meet her gaze. When she finally found his face among the crowd, her expression said everything: confusion, realization, betrayal. For the first time, she knew what it felt like to be on the other side of deceit. That night, Ethan drove home alone. He left her there to face the aftermath. As he gripped the steering wheel, flashes of her tearful face kept replaying in his mind. Part of him thought he might feel guilt, but there was none, only emptiness. Every lie she had told had led them to that moment. She had shattered their life in secret. He had simply returned the favor in the light. Over the next few days, Rachel's world fell apart piece by piece. Her company suspended her to avoid scandal. Friends stopped answering her calls. Liam disappeared again, leaving her messages unanswered, his number disconnected. Ethan didn't have to lift another finger. The truth had done all the work for him. He watched quietly as she tried to pick up the fragments of her life, knowing she'd never be able to put them back the way they were. But even as he sat in the silence of their empty home, something inside Ethan began to shift. The revenge that had once felt so righteous now left a hollow ache. He had won, yes, but the cost was everything that had once made his life feel whole. Rachel's humiliation was complete, but so was his isolation. Yet even through the emptiness, he couldn't deny the dark satisfaction of knowing she finally understood what it felt like to lose everything. Days turned into weeks, and the echo of what Ethan had done still lingered in every corner of the house they once called home. The walls felt heavier now, quieter, as if even they carried the weight of what had happened. Rachel had moved out 2 weeks after the gala, her face pale, her voice brittle and hollow. She didn't cry or beg. She simply packed her things and left behind a silence that clung to the air like dust. Ethan had thought that moment would feel like victory, like freedom from the web of lies that had poisoned their marriage. But instead it felt like standing at the edge of a vast emptiness. No anger left, no satisfaction, just the faint ringing of everything he had lost. News of the scandal had spread far beyond the gala. Videos of the incident circulated quietly online, shared and re-uploaded by strangers who didn't even know them. People whispered about it at Rachel's former workplace, at cafes, even in the small community they had lived in for years. Her name became synonymous with humiliation, her reputation fractured beyond repair, and yet when Ethan thought about her now, it wasn't with the same fury that had once driven him. It was with an ache that felt almost like grief. He had destroyed her, but in doing so, he had destroyed the part of himself that had once loved her too. He kept telling himself it was justice, that she had earned this, that betrayal deserved consequence. But late at night, when he sat alone in their empty living room, staring at the flicker of the television that played to no one, he found himself haunted by her voice, the way she used to call his name softly, the way she had laughed before all the secrets, before the lies. Those memories didn't fade with revenge. They stayed, stubborn and vivid, reminding him that once upon a time there had been something real between them. One evening, months later, he received a letter in the mail. No name, no return address, just his own written neatly on the front in familiar handwriting. He hesitated before opening it. Inside there was a single sheet of paper and a folded photograph. The photo was of them, him and Rachel, smiling in front of their old apartment taken during their first year of marriage. On the back in her handwriting were the words, "I never meant to hurt you. I just couldn't let go of who I was before you." The letter that accompanied it was short, almost painfully calm. She wrote that she was leaving the city for good, that she needed to start over somewhere no one knew her name, that she hoped someday he could forgive her. Not for what she did, but for what she turned him into. Ethan read it again and again until the words blurred. Forgive her? The thought felt impossible. And yet as he sat there, the rage that had once defined him felt distant, almost meaningless. He realized he had spent so long trying to punish her that he had forgotten how to live without the anger. The revenge had become his identity. And now that it was over, he didn't know who he was anymore. He took a deep breath, walked to the fireplace, and tossed the letter inside. The paper caught flame immediately, curling into glowing edges before turning to ash. He watched it burn, not out of hatred this time, but release. The photo burned slower, her smile disappearing last like a ghost fading into smoke. That night, for the first time in months, Ethan opened the windows and let the cold night air fill the house. The air smelled of rain and something clean, something new. He didn't know where his life would go from here. He didn't have plans or goals or even peace yet. But as he looked out at the quiet street, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe revenge hadn't given him closure, but it had forced him to confront the truth of who they both were. Flawed, broken and human, and in that fragile silence, with the ghosts of their love finally fading into the night, Ethan understood that some endings aren't about justice or victory, they're about acceptance. What was done could never be undone, but life, in its cruel and merciful way, would still go on.